Paul Harris, welcome to Beyond Stage Fright. You've got an international reputation as one of the world's leading educationalists. As a composer and a writer, you've got more than 600 publications to your name, and you're in great demand as a workshop leader and educator around the world. Tell me first, where you think performance stress and performance anxiety in musicians comes from?
Well, if I may just start with a short story, which was quite a stressful performing situation for myself. It was the funeral of my wonderful clarinet professor and teacher and mentor, John Davis. One of the great teachers ever, I would say, with total certainty. Sadly, John died about 2 years ago, and the funeral, many clarinet players were invited to it, all the great and the good in the clarinet world. And I do a lot of performing, but I don't do the huge amount that some of his other pupils and students do. And I was asked by Helen, his daughter, to perform at the funeral with a friend of mine who was also a John Davis pupil. And so this was potentially an extremely stressful situation. Anyway, we rehearsed well. And that, of course, is absolutely essential in terms of reducing stress. You have to know what you're going to do. So I'm kind of assuming that everyone has presumably said something along those lines. Your rehearsal, your practice is of the highest possible level. So we knew what we were going to do. And we got there, and everyone was there as expected. And what brought us through that performance, with ease actually, was one is that John, as a teacher, imbued all his pupils with an enormous sense of self-belief. I don't mean an ego or an arrogance or a conceit. I mean a self-belief, a gentle, quiet, powerful self-belief. That is what he did. So we had that to begin with. Then there was a tremendous, and I don't want to kind of sound cheesy here, but there was a tremendous feeling of love in this situation. Me for John, for his daughter Helen, who had organised it, for my friend Jean, who was playing the other clarinet, and for the music as well. We loved this piece. It was a duet by Croussel, which I played many times. And it's lovely music, and it's music that John would write. And so there was this tremendous sense that we're all here together, doing something that we all love doing, for the right reasons. We're there for the right reasons, doing the right things at the right time for the right reasons. And therefore, there was very little stress. In a potentially very stressful situation, there was very little stress. And we enjoyed it. And everyone enjoyed it. And I didn't feel at all intimidated by, principal clarinet in this London orchestra and all the other big people that were there. Because there was no necessity to. And so it worked. So I thought perhaps we can sort of begin to unpick that situation. How was it that I ended up in that situation? How can we think about other people? How can we create a situation where other people are similarly, when they are performing, not feeling intimidated by the situation?
You're talking about self-belief and the importance of that. What do you think causes this stress in so many people?
It can begin very young, actually. It begins, I don't mean to sound slightly putting bad feelings around parents or teachers, but let's kind of talk about it in an objective way. Some parents are delighted if their children show talent. I don't mind talent. I much prefer hard work. If you're born with talent, well, that's great, but it doesn't actually matter. If you use that talent well, that's fantastic. It's like being born, with a toenail. That person's got a toenail, fantastic. They've just got one. You've got some talent. If you use that talent well, that's what's important. And parents who go rather overboard and say, "Oh, you're so wonderful, what fantastic talent you have," straight away, from a very young age, that begins to put stress on people, because they feel, it may not be front stage, it may be backstage in the mind, but they feel they have to live up to that talent all the time. And that, in a sense, is stressful. Even when they don't consider it to be stressful, it's beginning to create a sort of stress. And then their teachers are then working with them and probably praising them for what they do well. Now, there's nothing wrong in praising someone for what they do well, of course. It's nice, oh, you did that well, that's very good. But in fact, it does start creating a cumulative stress, because every time you do something well, the next time you have to do it either as well or better. So, you've got some stress there. If, on the other hand, a teacher and a parent begins to use what some people call appreciative praise rather than judgmental praise. Judgmental praise is saying, well done, you played that very well. You're judging it, you played that very well. They could just as well have said, well done, or not well done, you didn't play it very well, or that wasn't very good. What they need to say is something along the lines of, well done, you put a lot of work into that, and your work has really borne fruit. Or something along those lines. Or first of all, to start off such a comment with, I enjoyed that, and which is non-judgmental. To make our praise more appreciative rather than judgmental at those early stages sets up in a young person's mind, I worked hard, or I did a certain amount of practice, I performed like that, and my teacher or my parents appreciated it. And they are good feelings that create a sort of bedrock of self-belief, which we can then move forward on. If always the sort of response we get is judgmental, we learn fear. There's no doubt of that. And we learn fear. Parents are very good at teaching children fear. They're always saying things like, don't do that, don't touch that, don't let us down, that wasn't good enough, don't make a fool of yourself. All these kind of comments that sometimes parents produce, and teachers as well, it creates fear. And so how do we battle that, or how do we combat that? We take care. I'm not going to play that piece very fast, because if I did, it might go wrong. Or I'm going to hide behind the music stand because I don't want anyone to see me. Or other sorts of withdrawing kind of behaviours. And eventually, it all sort of ends up not in a good place, in a bad place. So it all starts quite young, really. And I think if we teach and parents approve in a more appreciative way, then at least at that stage, we are setting up the kind of non-fearful approach to performing. I'm going out there because I feel comfortable.
You've mentioned the judgmental side of praise, but the judgmental side of criticism can also be very strong and very damaging.
We're going into a huge area of the approach to teaching. Again, on this thing I could talk about all day, but I won't do that, because I know we're limited. But there are ways of teaching and reacting to a pupil's work which are not negatively critical. Of course we have to help. Whether straight criticism is a good help, I don't know. I wouldn't like to say one way or the other, really. A lot of players have done very well on a huge amount of negative criticism. Whether that's in the long term a good thing, because you may think I'm being a bit strong here, but I think a lot of players are psychologically damaged. And so you may say, but, for the sake of the art, that is okay. And, in certain cultures, I believe that to be a thought. They say, well, if you want to be a performer, you've just got to go through this trauma, and eventually you'll be a performer. You may become psychologically damaged at the end. They may not say those words. You may become psychologically damaged, but that's the price to pay. Well, is it? Is it a fair price to pay? And again, I don't want to adjudicate on that particular thought. Others can talk about it, but we have to think about it. Anyway, going back to the original point, can we teach in such a way where we are not negatively criticising all the time? And the answer to that question is absolutely yes. Of course we can. If we're the kind of teacher that sets up the pupil's next response, I'd like you to play the next 4-bar phrase or the next part of this piece or whatever it is. And if we have ensured that student, that musician, knows what they're going to do, and then they say, yes, I'm ready to play this, and then they play it, we are listening, we are judging what they are doing in our minds, but then the way that we impart our response can be in a very non-judgmental way. We can be saying, let's perhaps try this, or why didn't we explore that area now, because of something that wasn't quite as we would wish it. But we do it in a very proactive, positive way, rather than a negative, judgmental way. And if you think about a lesson, a lesson that perhaps is half an hour or an hour, how many times do we react to a pupil's activity? I mean, we may react 20 times or 100 times. And if each of those reactions are positive and life-enhancing and forward-moving, obviously things are good. If all those reactions, or a good number of them, are negatively critical, it builds up, it's a toxin, and it builds up like a poison. And eventually it's going to have quite an effect on that student. So I mean, that's one thought about the way that we can begin to create a more positive sense of self-belief at the early stages of that.
How much do you think the judgmental side of criticism and of praise impacts people so they feel the need to impress on stage?
I mean, I think once we get into the I'm doing it because I love the spotlight on me, I love to show off, well, it's not a great recipe for future work, really. It's too ego-centered. I mean, if the ego is involved, then you're going to feel nervous, because you're always there. You're always wanting to protect yourself. You want to protect your reputation. Your reputation is what is paramount. It's me, and so if I don't do brilliantly, then it's me that is being attacked, and so we do certainly have to be very careful about letting the ego be the most important aspect of what it is that causes us to perform.
How much do you think loving what you're doing and loving the music lessens performance anxiety?
Enormously. I mean, that absolutely enormously. So I mean, that really is asking the question, why are we performing? Why are we performing? And there are a number of reasons why we perform. And now, I wouldn't want to put them necessarily in an order of importance, but let's explore them. We perform because we do like, I don't know whether showing off is the right expression, but we do like the applause, and we do like the buzz of saying to people, look what I can do. That's one aspect of it. Then there are the more sort of musical aspects of it. Like, for example, I love this music, and I want people to see what I can do with it. I have something to say musically. I have something to say as an artist. And if you've thought that through, of course you've got something to say, and other people should be allowed to experience that, like a good actor, or a good novelist, or a good painter. They have something to say. A musician has something to say. I love this music, and I particularly think this is a wonderful piece or a wonderful song, whatever it is, and I want to show you. I want to show you that. I want us to enjoy that particular thought. And there's another thought, which is a more broad thought, which is, I'm involved in sustaining a great art. Music is a great art. It's, some would say it's the greatest art. I don't want to suggest that, but different people have their views. But it's a great art, and it looks backwards. And in today's culture, we have a rather problematic view on that, or at least some people do. And they say, what's in the past is old, and we have to move on. We have to forget all that. Well, to me, that's an extremely naive view, and I'm going to subscribe to that. If you think about great composers of the past, going back, we remember these people who were working 200, 300, 400, 500 years ago. That they had amazing minds. Bach, an extraordinary mind. He wasn't. No one thought so at the time. But, when we look at his music, you think, this is an extraordinary mind. What he did was extraordinary. In the truest sense of that word, it was extraordinary. And what we do is we continue to allow this great mind to have times for other people to enjoy it. And Mozart and all these other people, if you think about how many people have ever lived, ever, zillions of them, and how many composers that we remember A tiny number. Why do we remember this minuscule number of people from the past compared to the number of people that have ever lived? Because they had massive brains and massive ability. And it's part of our job to sustain this great art that they all contributed to. And that is a strong point, certainly in my mind, when I'm performing. I do it because I like the applause at the end, but I do it because I love this piece, I love this music, and I feel that the bigger picture is that I'm part of a group of people that are sustaining a great art. And of course, once you start thinking like that, the ego becomes very small. And so, in a way, stress and nerves begin to slip away because you feel, well, it's not about me. It's about these much greater things.
I see so many musicians put composers on pedestals with this sort of fear of getting things wrong, whereas in fact composers like Mozart and Beethoven in their time were known as great improvisers, and there wouldn't have been this paralysing need for perfection. What do you feel about that?
Interestingly, my teacher, John Davis, one of the things he often said to me is that, I won't tell you quite how he said it because it was slightly rude, but Mozart, we mustn't deify Mozart. He did all the things that normal people do, and was just a person. He did have an extraordinary mind, but he was just a person. He wrote nice music, and very nice music in many respects. And what we do is to re-perform it. This point that you make about deifying composers, putting them on a pedestal, is a true one, actually. And we mustn't do that. I don't know why we do that. I think it's all down to some people's, psychology. I am small compared to these people. No, we're all on a level. If Mozart was coming to this room now, I'd say, "Oh, very nice to see you. Come down, have a cup of tea." And I wouldn't say that if I very, very occasionally in my life meet, celebrities and important people, I never feel intimidated by these people. They're just people. They have their job, they have their responsibilities, they have their ability. They may have worked hard for it, and so I appreciate that side of them. But I don't feel, no, you're some kind of person that I have to bow down in front of at all. And so it's a mindset, really. And in a way, we need to teach people not to have this mindset. We respect Mozart for his extraordinary genius, but we don't have to get stressed so that every tiny detail is right. And when Mozart plays his concertos, it'd be wonderful to hear them. I'm sure he would have been changing notes all the time. I mean, almost certainly, wouldn't he? And we have this thing. Oh no, it has to be. Let's get out of that mindset as well. We are always having to live up to someone else's expectation, and then we have this whole thing of musicology now, which is all great and lovely. But if it makes stress, then let's not bother with it. And I suppose the fact is, we have music colleges, we have specialist music schools. Why are they there? If they weren't there to uphold the absolute best practice, what would they be there for? So it's a funny psychology. They've become these places to do this. So they now have to do this to stay being those places. Do you see what I mean? That in itself puts a strange stress on things.
It's so easy, isn't it, with the deification of composers and the recording industry, for a musician to feel that they're not good enough.
It's a very unreal perfection. Some artists do go into a recording studio and they can record a piece straight off, but most don't. And they may do, let's do 500 takes on that note because we can quite get it in tune. And I've been in recording studios and seen all that stuff where editing can create the perfect performance, and does. And we don't know, because it doesn't say on a CD or recording, the following bars have been edited. Bar 7, we recorded this 7,000 times. They don't tell us that, but they do. And so we have these kind of extraordinary, perfect performances now that are recorded performances, and yet the problem with these is the stress they record. There's some amazing recordings by Horowitz, where he splashes away with innumerable wrong notes and everything, because they're live performances, But the musicianship there is plain for all to see, and many people love those performances, and they don't give us this sort of perfection that we have to kind of aim for all the time, which can cause us immense stress. And I'm not saying that we should lower our standards. That is not what it's all about. But it is all about trying to find a way where we can do music without it being so stressful that a tiny number of people only are able to achieve, and all the other people that might want to achieve can't, because they can't reach this perfection, which is very stressful and impossible.
What do you feel about competitions in terms of performance stress?
I think, and I won't go on a great diatribe about education now, but I think the way that we do educate people is that an enormous number of them come away from education thinking, I'm not good enough. And that is not good enough. That is not good. Because what happens to those people is that they go into life and they become slightly damaged adults, unhappy, sometimes angry, disappointed, and it affects their lives, and we shouldn't let this happen. We need to find an education system where more than just kind of the 10% or even fewer are good. And that means that we respect all learners at whatever their pace of movement is. That they are always achieving to the best of their ability. We don't do that. We have set standards in most things in life, and we have to then aspire to those standards. And I mean, it's impossible really. How do we affect a kind of education where individuals are allowed to achieve to their level, which makes them much more inwardly happy? I don't know how we do that. Somehow we need to find a way. So competitions, where we have to aspire to standards, it's very much in the preparation. I mean, this has been said a million times before. I'm not saying anything new. When teachers prepare pupils, students for exams or competitions or anything like this, they have to spend a lot of time on the preparation side, the psychological preparation side. I think one problem here actually is that a lot of teachers themselves have a lot of performance nerves, or don't necessarily feel that they're great performers themselves, which is not a problem, but it can affect the way that they teach other people, and they might keep these thoughts to themselves and not wish to go there, and therefore not wish to go there with their pupils because they're a little bit scared of that area. So I think we have to bring it all into the open, that what is a competition all about? Why do you do a competition? Is it important to win it? Well, yes, of course it's important to win it, but why is it important to win it? Why do you want to win this competition? Do you want to win it because the spotlight is on you and you're going to become famous, and which of course is going to be the answer is going to be yes in a lot of people, but then they need to question that, because if that really is the reason they want to win it, that is a recipe for, well, I could say disaster. It's certainly a recipe for potential problems, because if that's why you want to win it, well, you've got problems, because you are setting yourself up always for this at this expectational level, and if you don't reach it, you're going to become depressed and stressed, and things around you are going to not be happy. So I think if you go into a competition, you go in because you love playing the piano, you love playing the violin, you love singing, whatever it is. You feel your contribution to the greater art of music is very important. You'd like other people to hear the way that you want Mozart to sound. And if they like it, great. If they don't like it, well, that's fine. Because what we do, not everyone else is going to like. You have to go in with a very open mind, indeed, and say, I'm doing this because I want to do it, and actually I'm not going to mind terribly much what the outcome is.
And then there are the musicians who feel that they have to win competitions in order to get a career, in order to pay the bills, and that must put so much stress on them.
Well, of course it can, and it's inevitable. It is inevitable, because if you go into a competition where one person wins, then one person wins, and all the other people that go into it do not win. And so that could be 50 or 100 or whatever it is. So yes, of course, So if you go into a competition with this enormously high expectation, then it's going to be a problem. When you go into a competition, and if it is, well, I hope it's not really life-forming, because to enter a competition and that's really going to be the make or break to a career, that's not good. That is not a good place to be. We've got to find a way of, in our own mind, saying, well, I'm going into this competition, but it's not going to be life-forming, which doesn't in any way stop us from achieving our best possible levels. But at the same time, it puts us in a more psychologically comfortable place. If we go into competition thinking, this is absolutely life-forming, and then we lose, how damaging is that going to be? And then we've got to live with that, and then the next competition, we go to that competition with a lot of excess, stressful baggage somewhere in our mind that is going to inevitably affect our next performance. So it's a very difficult road to tread, but we've got to find the route where we feel, yes, this is important, I'm going to do my best, but at the same time, it's not going to transform my life one way or the other. I know it's the way today, but we've got to try to get in there and say, well, actually, I'm going to think this through. Otherwise, we get damaged people who have, immense psychological trauma.
Are there more positive alternatives to competitions, do you think?
Well, I mean, do you mean literally? There are, I suppose. What if you look at the music world out there? What is there for us to do? So competitions are important, and the lucky few will win them, and hopefully do well. I mean, they don't all do well. We could do an interesting survey of competition winners through the times. It would be very interesting actually to do a psychological survey of that and see how they are, both in terms of success, career success, and psychological success. That would be an interesting thing. I don't know whether everyone's done that survey, but it would be interesting. But are there any alternatives? Well, I mean, I do. I don't want to mention any names, but I do know one or two very successful musicians, soloists, who have created their careers without winning competitions. It wouldn't be fair to mention names, but call me later and I can tell you who I'm thinking of. But there are people out there, so there are other ways of doing it, which is by just creating. As long as you are a good musician, you work hard, you're a nice person, you get on well with other people. Your intention as a musician is to share. I think on the whole, you're more likely to do well than not to do well, and potentially able to do very well. I mean, all this depends on being able to serve up the goods, obviously. Now, I'm taking that as a read, that we've all done all our practice, and we've been taught well in a non-stressful way, so that we have that self-belief. It's not an ego-led self-belief. It's a much more self-aware, loving self-belief, really, and that will enable us to move forward. So I think there is another way. We don't have to win competitions. It may be more difficult. The competition may be like the X Factor, instant fame, instant and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't happen for many people. And I think if we go through life saying, well, it might happen to me, it's perhaps not a very good way of thinking, because it's unlikely to. That's the reality of it. Another thing I'd love to see more of is informal is not the word, but spontaneous music making on Sunday afternoons. It's always been my desire, actually. What do we do on Sunday afternoons? People go to sport or cook or go shopping and or put their feet up. But a nice way of using Sunday afternoons is get a group of people together, put on a concert in a local centre. Whoever you are, whether you are the world's greatest competition winner or just someone doing their grade 5. Let's get together and put on a concert and share music with other people on a regular basis. That would be a nice thing to do, and it would be done in a fairly stressless situation. Not that playing at the Royal Festival Hall should be any more stressful if you're psychologically prepared.
What are your suggestions for musicians to manage performance stress when they've had a lot of negative criticism in their life and maybe some really draconian teaching?
Which is still quite regular today. I mean, my teaching at the academy, lots of people come up to me and tell me horror stories about the draconian teaching that they've endured in the past, but somehow or another they've had the self-will to get through it. So yes, how do you deal with that? You have to do a lot of self-reflecting, I think. I think you have to think a lot about it, and ask yourself some very serious questions, which on the whole I don't think people do very much. I don't know how much time people spend going out for a walk and thinking, or sitting, in a nice place and just thinking about things. It's very important to do quite a bit of self-reflection, as a performer, as a teacher, whatever aspect it is, performer and a teacher. And I think they need to think the kind of fundamental questions that we were asking before. Who am I doing it for? I mean, for example, are they doing it for their parents? Did their parents push them into music? An interesting story. Not long ago, I went to hear a masterclass, and quite a young boy was playing this quite flashy piece. And at the end of his performance, before the master started speaking, he glanced at his parents, who were sitting there in the front row, and so I saw so much in that glance. I saw, did you approve? He was looking at them for approval, really. And I thought, well, this boy has obviously done a lot of hard work to get to where he is. But is he doing it because he loves doing it? Or is he doing it for the approval of his parents? And in that particular case, I thought this boy was doing it for the approval of his parents. And that is always going to be there. And so he's never going to be doing it for himself unless he makes that decision. Because these people that do get there, they need to think through, why am I doing it? Am I doing it because I love doing it, essentially? And then there's other nice reasons of putting it into a more global context. But if we're not doing it because we love doing it, why are we doing it? I mean, why are we doing it? Who are we doing it for? Because we can put ourselves through immense stress. We know stories of great artists who are extremely stressful all the time. Well, I mean, fine if they want to be, if they don't mind that, if they don't mind that stress. If they do mind that stress, then it'll be nice for them to think about, well, what's it all about? Why am I doing this? Can I find the real reasons that might then just release me from this stress and allow me to do it with a mind that says, this is a wonderful thing to do. Because that's where we all want to be, ideally.
As a teacher, what do you see when a student is really playing well on stage?
Well, I think you see a couple of things, really, because you see physical things and you see emotional things, or psychological things, whatever you want to call them. And obviously, if you've done a good performance at any level, and I think, again, that's another mindset we need to be in. For example, if we were in a small hall, and there's going to be two performers in that hall. The first person is the greatest pianist in the world, and they come in and they play, the most difficult piece in the world, and brilliant. And then the next person is a beginner, who has also worked extremely hard at their piece and comes in and plays it absolutely beautifully. Now, who's done the better job? Who's the better musician? Who should have more, applause? Well, neither really. They both. Of course, the other one has spent years and done a huge amount of work, but in a way, if they both done that because they both love playing their pieces, then their own receipt of what they've just done is the same in most respects, and the way that we appreciate them is the same. And when someone has gone up there and done something good because they've loved doing it, and you can see the glow on their face, then that's lovely. And in playing or in teaching, if one has produced something that results in that, then everyone feels wonderful. And there's, because that kind of feeling, you just catch it, don't you? You feel it. It's there, and everyone feels wonderful. You don't feel a sort of release from stress. which is sometimes happens at the end. Oh, thank God I got that over, and I didn't play with too many mistakes. You know, that happens a lot, but don't we teach people to think like that, whereas we shouldn't?
Paul Harris, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed talking with you.